ABC readers. This is Eileen with our last lesson of the year for 5th grade classrooms only. This is the book, as you can probably see in front of me, Who Moved My Cheese? And so we are going to go over some themes and ideas of the book. But basically I can tell you, depending how much time you have in the classroom, this is a long book, and so I would choose my time wisely to make sure that there's time for discussion more than a lot of pointed activities or other things in the lesson plan are suggested. But this is an opportunity, since it's the last lesson of the year, to really build upon the connections you've made with your students throughout the year. At this point of the year, most 5th graders are probably having some thoughts or feelings about next year and middle school, and so this is a great opportunity, and why we do this book at the end of the year, to give them a safe place to brainstorm, share, and just have the opportunity to talk a little further about what is coming in terms of middle school. And so this book is a platform for that. So I'm going to go over some information that was given to us at the training about this book and expanding upon those ideas. But I'm going to save you the trouble at least first and tell you that even if your outline and lesson plan for that is to go into the classroom and introduce yourself and connect with kids and say, we're talking about this book, Who Moved My Cheese, as a way to get you ready for next year, because everyone will be starting a new year when you come back. And just focusing on this concept that change happens to everyone, and that people handle change in different ways. And so helping our students learn how or what different ways to deal with change and become more resilient is really the main idea behind the book. So that's why telling students that, and then having the book presented, and then following up with what do they think might be different, or what will be the same, what might they be feeling about the changes that are on the horizon is important, and as well as then just teaching them the concept that they do have control over how they react to change, even though they may not have control over the change itself, is really important. And so as an ABC reader, you should still have access to the Project Cornerstone website. And so I highly encourage you, because this book is very long, and I'm not going to read it to you today in this training, but I really want to encourage you. There is a YouTube link on the website for Who Moved My Cheese, just like every other book. It won't be under the building year section. It kind of has its own section on the website. Underneath building year, it says Who Moved My Cheese. And so you can click on this, which is what I just did in preparing for this lesson after our training. So I encourage you to click on that lesson. There is an animated version of this book. It says it's 20 minutes long, which I think is pretty accurate. And as you can see in the pages, this is the beginning of the story. But as the pages go on and on, the words become more and more. And so I myself, I think for most students, it's a long book. It might be hard to keep them engaged. Look at all these words. So I highly encourage you to consider the animated version of the story.
Too, and see if they're some of them more cooked up.
So that's what I would encourage you, because each 5th grade classroom would have their smartboard and their laptop capability. I've done this in other lessons this year. So I really encourage you to save yourself the reading time this year. In this particular story, click on the YouTube link in your classroom that says Who Moved My Cheese. There's a 5-minute preview and then a 20-minute, and you want the 20-minute book. And then just let this play, because it's an animated version, which I think the kids will be more engaged in and appreciate the story by having it told on screen. So we can pretend that we've done that. And then for lesson plan, like I said, just giving an opportunity to talk with them about, straight from the outline, what do you remember about the story? Why did the characters have to change? There are all these questions on the outline. There's about 10 or 11 questions. And so I would say just choose a couple and then launch into a greater discussion or opportunity for discussion about let's talk about what changes might be coming up for you with school ending and at the end of summer, school starting at a new school. For all of you as fifth graders will be going to a new school and leaving Laurel. And so then what I also found really helpful, hopefully the classroom link has worked with the YouTube lesson for this book, because then there's also this great YouTube link listed right there underneath those two, and it says tips for middle schoolers, and it's only like a 5-minute video, and it is this guy who must have a blog or something, I'm not sure, but he outlines tips for middle schoolers, and it is fantastic. And I highly recommend, even though we've signed up to be readers, I feel like this lesson this month allows us an opportunity to just facilitate a greater medium in terms of these online things. Plus it's the end of the year and kids have been, I know, listening to me read all year, so I think this is a nice opportunity to just let technology serve them well. So hopefully your classroom can show the 20-minute version of the book, and then the 5-minute tips for middle schoolers, and then at the conclusion of that, then we can launch into a discussion, just however we may want in terms of our outline of, let's talk a little more about middle school. What are your thoughts about what he said, or what you've heard about school? And I just really think if you can facilitate a discussion, and a meaningful one that provides an opportunity to acknowledge their feelings, to respect their thoughts, and to, if nothing else, to comfort and nurture and support this notion of change, and that it is something everyone will face and can be very supportive. But in terms of, the goals, as we said, we can focus on the fact that there's a different way to handle change. The 4 characters are sniff, scurry, hem, and haw, and they each represent a way that people respond to change differently. And everyone uses a variety of strategies to deal with change. In our training, the focus was really on how you choose to deal with your reaction is key to how you handle change. And so people having different reactions, then there's sort of these stages of accepting change. And so they point out in the PowerPoint this idea that for some people, when they've dealt with change, there's resistance or denial even, or just exploration in terms of asking for suggestions, and then a commitment to how we're going to handle that change in the form of problem solving or adapting to changed circumstances. So that is a little bit about the story and the lesson. There is also a suggestion that you could do an activity if you have time. I think we may not have time, but if you wanted to expand upon this, you could bring some index cards or a piece of paper and have the kids, after we've shown each of those videos, maybe they could write down, or maybe you could even just engage in a discussion about what are some feelings that you have about middle school, and write them on the board, or with index cards, what would be some worries you have about middle school, and then on the other side of the card, what are some things that you are looking forward to about middle school. So this idea of here are some worries and here are some good things, almost this pros and cons idea. If you find that your class is not wanting to or willing to or as able to engage in a classroom discussion, you can do an activity like that to help elicit participation in a very structured way by, okay, everyone write some things you're worried about in middle school, some things you're looking forward to in middle school. And then an opportunity to discuss some of those cards or those thoughts, and maybe even just problem solving class together. Especially if there are several cards that have the same thing, this might be an opportunity as a reader to focus on one problem and see if the class together could come up with some ideas of how to brainstorm some solutions or ideas, or certainly asking the teacher as well to participate in, because they've probably had experiences where other students have gone to middle school, maybe they've come back, and maybe they might have a story to share that I had a student who was really worried about this, but then when they came back later they told me that it wasn't as bad as they thought, or they tried this and this worked. And so this is really just an opportunity for problem solving and acknowledging thoughts and feelings about this notion of change, and at least for this story, it's focused on cheese, and somebody moved the cheese, and I expected the cheese to be here, and now it's not, and so what do I do about that? Is really a metaphor for how we, as people, adapt to change, face change, and move on from these changes. So this is a very short lesson, but I think this kind of covers the gist of what we are wanting you to do in the classroom. At our training, like I said, there were 4 sort of steps or stages to adapting to change that they outlined. And so I just want to reinforce those again. Denial, resistance, acceptance or exploration, and then commitment, this idea of problem solving and welcoming the change now that I have a new solution to use. And these characters in the book reflect those stages. As we said, Hem and Haw are very indecisive about what to do or how to adapt to the change. Sniff, smell change early and makes a plan to continue to explore and figure out what to do about this change. Scurry is quick to act and just goes in with this change. And so these are just kind of sort of, as I said, they exemplify these 4 ways of adapting to change. And then lastly, if you want and are creative and would like to bring in a visual aid to your classroom, they had suggested, maybe you could bring in a backpack and you could tape on it sort of these little sayings, and it's all the lessons or ideas or things that we talked about all year long. And it is a nice way to kind of wrap up the 5th grade year in Project Cornerstone. And on the website, there is a specific thing that you click on that says backpack. It's a PDF. I have printed it out. I have not cut them into pieces of paper here for this training, but you could do that. I'm going to do that myself. Cut up these pieces of paper and then just attach them to the backpack, or maybe I just tape them to the board or something. It's just all these ideas that are another sort of connection for kids of how to handle a change. And basically the concept or the quote or the takeaway can be something as simple as, don't be afraid to change. When you change what you believe, you can change what you do. And so that is sort of the main theme of the book. And so this notion that every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end, just however you want to frame or word this concept of change, how we adapt to it, is important. But more importantly, change has a lot of directions within which we can go in terms of reacting to it. So who moved my cheese? Middle schoolers especially, we know they made a list at our training of all these different components to middle schoolers. So for those of you at home who are still wanting to listen to more, I will just randomly throw this list off. This was an idea that was shared in our training. Make a list of what middle schoolers are, and I'm sure you could come up with your own list at home, but here's just some things to think about. Our students who are 5th graders and moving on to middle school, physically they are growing, they're developing, they're changing, and what goes along with that is a lot of volatile and powerful emotions. They talked about how maybe for middle schoolers to be successful, we just need to help them focus on 2 out of 3 important things, being sleep, nutrition, exercise. If they can do 2 of those 3 things and attend to those needs well, that alone will help them survive their middle school years. Because oftentimes, since they're growing so much, they're going to need that sleep, they're going to need that nutrition, they're going to need that exercise or that physical outlet to deal with all these volatile and powerful emotions. Changing bodies come with strong urges. Just this notion in middle school of who am I going to become? These are the themes, and along with that, while we're trying to figure this out as a middle schooler, there's an immense amount of peer pressure and sort of our values come into question. To be or not to be me, what does that mean? And just navigating the school day, we can help our children who are growing into middle schoolers or leaving Laurel as 5th graders just understand the concept that the school day will look very different next year. You're not just coming to 1 classroom, you're going to 6 or 7 classrooms, and you have to navigate where those classrooms are in relation to where your locker is, and do you have all your books? So organization, time management, all these life lesson skills that are important all hit us at once in middle school. And along with that, our moods are changing, and there's temptations, and the social scene is changing, maybe even daily, just based on who you have in class or who you have next to you with your locker. And to just keep in mind that relationships are changing, not just at school, but at home. As our middle schoolers are growing, their connections with their siblings or their mother or their father or their grandmother, grandfather, all these things in addition to me in relation to the world outside of my home, whether that's technology and how I'm managing that. You can see that a life for a middle schooler is very complex. It's very involved. It's very expansive. And so the more we can help our students understand and appreciate or attend to these needs as they come, because it may be different for each student, this kind of book helps along the way, because there is a lot of change to adapt to, and there's more than one way to adapt to change. So thank you for listening. This concludes the last lesson of the year, and we appreciate your time.